Welcome back to a year of Final Fantasy, the month of Valifor, and unofficially the month of the Chocobo. Today we're going to be talking about the one and only never talked about game, Chocobo Racing. Let me take you back to a time when kart racers were all the rage. Back in the mid to late 90s, after the collectathon hype was at full peak, a partner genre began to emerge known as the kart racer via the Super Mario Kart franchise. After the N64 and PlayStation released, we got Super Mario Kart 64. Closely on its heels were Diddy Kong Racing by Rare, and of course PlayStation had to follow suit with Crash Team Racing, Crash Bandicoot being the unofficial mascot for the PlayStation at the time. And in 1999, the world was blessed with the heights of video gaming as an art form in the form of Chocobo Racing. Alright, so maybe Chocobo Racing isn't the greatest game ever to grace the earth, but it's still a competent kart racer. In terms of popularity though, it may have come a little bit too late to cash in on the hype of that kart racing genre. But really, let's just take a look at it and see what we get with Chocobo Racing for the PlayStation. The game obviously is a racing game in an arcade style of racer rather than a simulationist style of racer, and the kart racer genre, alongside him being more arcadey in the presentation, is defined by one major thing really, and that's items to pick up to attack, defend, or otherwise give yourself an advantage in the race. In Chocobo Racing, there are 8 different types of magic stones which provide different abilities, in the form of Reflect, Doom, Fire, Blizzard, Thunder, Haste, Mini, and Ultima. Some of the staple magics of Final Fantasy that you see all throughout the series. What's interesting here though is that many of the stones, save for the Doomstone, levels up a number of additional times, where if you collect more, usually 2 more times, you'll get a more powerful version of the magic that you're going to use, which as you would expect makes its effect more powerful or longer lasting or whatever, depending on the type of magic stone. Alongside that, with the ability to attack others or defend yourselves, there are many different characters in the game, and it's probably one of the game's strongest aspects, because not only do each of the characters have little quirks about them that give them faster acceleration or higher top speed or better handling, each character themselves has a different special ability that none of the other characters have, which is really cool. I really like that aspect of the game. So let's go ahead and list the racers that we have and what their special abilities are. Of course, number 1, we have Chocobo, who actually doesn't use karts in this, and that's a thing you'll actually see with a lot of these racers, is they may use different kinds of ways of racing, not just in karts. So here Chocobo uses these jet rollerblade type of things, and he also sports a special dash ability. Next up we have Mog, who has the flap ability to avoid ground-based hazards, Golem here, who has a special grip up ability which increases his handling, Goblin, who can steal spells from racers in the front of the pack, Black Mage, who can instantly power up a spell that he has, White Mage, who can create a barrier around herself to nullify some of the magic used on her, the chubby Chocobo here, who actually has the power to receive a magic spell cast on him, not just completely nullify it. And we also have Behemoth here, who has a charge ability that gives the character a boost that can ram the other characters and make him spin out. And finally, later on, it's not immediately available, but you can get Bahamut, who has his dragon wings, which means that he can fly above hazards on the road, and he sports his Mega Flare attack, which is actually a large-scale magic attack that causes all of the characters to spin out. Again, you can see how he would be a late game addition in which you have to beat the story to unlock, because he's incredibly powerful. So alongside those, I'm going to break a rule that I usually don't do, and I'm going to talk about some of the hidden characters here, because anyone who's played Chocobo Racing has probably already found these characters, and if you haven't by now, then you're probably not invested enough. So I want to talk a little bit about them because there's some really cool stuff in here. We have Squall Leonhart from Final Fantasy VIII, who uses his Gunblade, Final Fantasy VIII being the most recent game released at the time when this came out. We also have Sid, who rides around in a tank, a Moomba named Mamba, who is a kind of Final Fantasy VIII specific lion type character. I think they wanted to introduce a Mog Chocobo type of species into the series, but it never just gained grounds with the fans, but that's alright. We also have Cloud Strife, who has this hardy Daytona bike, which you can see in Final Fantasy VII and all of the bike mini-games. Cactar appears here as well, alongside an 8-bit Chocobo who races on foot, and the SS Invincible airship from Final Fantasy III. Let me be completely clear, the real Final Fantasy III. We also have a very interesting addition with Aya Brea, who actually stars in the Parasite Eve series, and she drives around a police car. Finally, Jack, who doesn't remember Jack, who's the star of the 3D World Runner. And that's all I'm going to say about that because I don't know anything else about that. So as you can see, we have a ton of characters here, and that's really, like I said before, the biggest part of the game, all of these Final Fantasy characters racing off against one another. There is a small story to go along with them, and they have respective stages that pop up through the story, but you know, I don't really go over stories here, and as you can probably imagine, Chocobo Racing doesn't have the most in-depth, enthralling story, but that's alright. In similar Final Fantasy fashion, we also have Sid, who is actually telling you this story, and what's somewhat interesting here is that this Sid is actually the same Sid from the Chocobo Dungeon series, at least the ones on the PlayStation. Now, as far as tracks go, that's usually the biggest draw of kart games, all the wacky fun tracks. This is where the game actually comes up a little bit short with only 10 tracks, which at the time was actually a lot less than kart racers had back then in 1999. For instance, Mario Kart had the normal 16 tracks, and this only having 10, that's far less, but even compared to today's kart racer like Mario Kart 8, that game has 48 tracks. That's insane. So going back, looking at 10 different tracks, a few of them are just completely throwaway, very basic tracks. It's the weakest part of the game, but this isn't really to be a review or anything, it's just to get the information out. But we can list the tracks off real quick. We have Sid's Test Track, we have Moogle Forest, we have the Ancient Gate, Mithril Mines, Black Manor, Floating Gardens, Gingerbread Land, which is just super weird to put in, Volcano Valley, not Volcano, that's a Volcano Valley, Fantasia, and the Final Fantasy VIII Circuit, which is based on Delling City from Final Fantasy VIII, with a few little minor alterations, of course. The music for Chocobo Racing was a collection of older Final Fantasy musics remixed by Kenji Ito, so we don't have Uematsu working on the musical soundtrack, but we do have his work being remixed here, and it's quite good. It's what you would expect. And honestly, that's about it for the game. I remember playing this game quite a bit now that I look back on it, and I really enjoyed it, but looking back, reminiscing on those times, aside from the novelty of it being a Final Fantasy racing game, it just falls short in comparison to the racers of today. Even then though, I still want to give it its due. It's a competent game. I really like the upgrade system and the magics, and like I said before, the biggest part of the game is the characters, and they're really fun to play around with, and it's cool what they've done with it. So if you're interested, check it out. It's still, like I said, a competent racing game, but it lacks the content of the kart racers of today. But still, you might really enjoy it. And for those who are in Japan, it did get a Japanese re-release on the PlayStation Store in 2009 on the PlayStation 3 and PSP, and I guess the Vita as well. But sadly, there's no release of it in the West digitally. Of course, you can do other means of finding the games, and that's all I'll say about that right here. So that's it for this episode. Next time, we'll be looking at a rather obscure outing for Chocobo himself, so keep a lookout for that. But until next time, Crystal Warriors, keep on gaming.